Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror film, Mahalai sa Yongwan. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with the first story about Mr. Skinny and his fat accomplice, Mr. Fatty. They're searching for Jimmy, who was meeting up with his girlfriend and their friends. As Mr. Skinny beats up Jimmy, his friends decide to gang up on Mr. Fatty. When Mr. Skinny finishes with Jimmy, he grabs a large bottle and heads for Jimmy's friends. He beats up badly the guy who first jumped on Mr. Fatty, as everyone else watches in horror, unable to stop him. When Jimmy comes, his girlfriend accuses him of hiding the fact that he's a stimulant dealer. Mr. Skinny then butts in to tell him that he's lucky that their boss didn't want him dead, especially since he's been stealing from them. Jimmy denies stealing the stimulants, and explains that he couldn't sell them since the cops are onto him. Mr. Skinny doesn't want to hear any more explanation, and demands that he take them to the products, and pay them the $200,000 he owes. Jimmy leads the two to his university, where he supposedly hid the products. He opens up his locker, and hands the products over to Mr. Fatty. On their way back to the car, Jimmy and his girlfriend keep glancing toward the upper floor. This worries Mr. Skinny, since he thinks that they have a backup somewhere in the university. The two refuse to answer at first. But when Mr. Skinny moves to beat Jimmy again, his girlfriend finally gives in, and promises to tell him what it is. They explain that there's a ghost in the 5th floor ladies' room. It's a female student who ended her life during school break. Despite the fear in both Jimmy and his girlfriend, Mr. Skinny still wants to see it, after hearing that there's an actual shrine dedicated to the ghost as well. On their way up, the elevator starts stopping on each floor. On the 2nd floor, they notice a figure standing at the end of the hallway. On the 3rd floor, there's no denying the figure watching them. Jimmy berates Mr. Skinny for forcing them to go. On the 4th floor, the figure finally moves. Mr. Fatty presses the button hard to close the elevator door. The figure stops just inches away, and tries to claw its way inside, as the four scream in fear, scrambling to hide in the corner. When they reach the 5th floor, nothing's waiting for them, but the elevator stops working. Mr. Skinny forces Jimmy out of the elevator, and asks him where the exit is. Jimmy then points to the end of the hallway. As they make their way towards the staircase, the figure pops up. Everybody panics, and Mr. Fatty runs for the elevator, which is slowly closing its door. When he successfully stops it from fully closing, another figure is waiting inside, and he falls back down in fear. Mr. Skinny, not knowing where to go, notices the sign for the ladies' bathroom, and heads inside, locking the door behind him. Mr. Fatty begs Mr. Skinny to open the door, while Jimmy and his girlfriend gaze down below. The couple jumps off the building. After hearing Jimmy's girlfriend scream, Mr. Fatty stops and turns around. The other figure is standing and waiting for his next move. It's implied that Mr. Fatty gets thrown off the building. Inside the ladies' bathroom, Mr. Skinny finds the body of the female student, who still has her noose wrapped around her neck. She claws to get closer to him, but is unable to reach him, as he runs away to avoid her. In his panic, his jeans get caught on one of the cubicle doors. It's suddenly quiet. When he looks up, two ghostly figures are walking towards him. He screams again, and pulls out his gun, pointing it at them. In fear, he wets himself with hormones. He turns towards the shrine, and whispers that he's scared, and apologizes. When he turns around again, one of the ghostly figures scares him, and he lets out another scream, which leads to the next story. The emergency medical technicians, called EMT for short, are called into the university. The three that jumped off the building are still alive. One is seriously injured, another unconscious, and the last is talking gibberish, which they think is because he's having a mental breakdown. The only one dead is Mr. Skinny, who was found in the ladies' bathroom. According to them, he shot himself in the head. On their way to the hospital, the EMT accidentally hits a girl, named Noknoi. Moi, a female EMT, immediately runs to her side to provide assistance. At the hospital, after hanging up the phone, Moi finds Noknoi sitting on a bench. She calls Moi, and asks for her help. In the next scene, we find a group of students enjoying their time on the school grounds. A senior student reprimands everyone who's dancing and cheering. He orders them to sit down, and reminds them they're on hallowed grounds. A ponytail-wearing guy approaches a girl wearing glasses, to ask what the senior student's problem is. She explains that seeing Noknoi, the niece of the general who ordered the killing of the students in school back in 1976, is enough to annoy the older guy. The senior student lectures the group, and asks them about their school's history. Noknoi knows that he is really aiming his words at her. Things are getting heated, so one of his friends decides to intervene, and hurries everyone to their next activity. The senior student is unperturbed and continues his rant. Nok Noi, tired of his yelling, confronts him. She points out that he's pinning something that happened before she was born. The senior student is speechless, until Nok Noi comments that the students weren't totally right. Everyone goes quiet and stares at her. It shows that they don't agree with her last words. The senior student leads her to what they call the red elevator, where students were brutally shot inside, and the bloodstains can't be cleaned. He dares her to go inside. Before she could enter the elevator, Nok Noi passes out, and hallucinates being inside the elevator and drowning in blood. After the incident, she starts seeing a boy everywhere. He follows her at school, which frightens her. During one of their classes, everyone heads for the red elevator, but Nok Noi chooses to take the stairs. However, when she gets to her floor, she finds it locked. She runs back upstairs, and yells for the students in the elevator to wait for her. As she reaches them, the boy realizes he left his bag, and rushes to get it. His female companion runs after him, and they leave Nok Noi alone in the elevator. She has another hallucination, and this time, she finds the students, who were killed in the said elevator. The door opens, and she finds herself transported back to the past, when the military was attacking the school, and killing the students. She sees firsthand what the students went through that day. Moi and her team stop at the school to drop off Nok Noi. As the other EMTs are talking, someone points out that Moi's seeing something they can't see. It turns out Nok Noi is a lost spirit that only Moi could see. They never really hit her. Nok Noi showed herself to Moi to ask for help. She's been trying to reunite the couple being killed that day, who in turn had sought her help. With Moi's help, Nok Noi fulfills her mission, and the boy and his girl meet again at a red elevator. The next story is about Cert, who's studying to be a dentist but is terrified of ghosts. While waiting for their professor, he daydreams about being forced to take teeth out of a couple of corpses, after an explosion at an ice factory. While attempting to do just that, the corpses come to life. He freaks out, and his classmates stare at him, as his classmate Joke screams at him to wake up. The professor finally arrives, and announces that 4 people submitted their reports late, including Joke and Cert. This angers Cert, since the only reason it was submitted late, was because Joke borrowed his report to copy off of it. After class, they head for the teacher's lounge, but are told that their professor is at the hospital. They finally find their professor but are brushed off, since she's working already, and it's not school hours. Cert chases after her, muttering his apologies. They run into a mortuary butler and a nurse arguing intensely. The butler is complaining that his leave got denied. He begs the professor to let him take the leave, because he's getting married. Since Cert wants to go back to the good graces of his professor, Cert volunteers to take the butler's shift instead. On New Year's Eve, the shift starts relatively simple, even though Cert is still worried. Joke arrives extremely late, and scares Cert by stealing his cup of coffee, while he is looking away. Joke points out that it's time for Cert to do a routine check. He informs the other boy he'll be going to the bathroom. Cert walks inside the mortuary, and checks on one of the bodies. He turns around, and the body on the gurney behind him starts moving. It starts sitting up, then Joke pulls the sheet down to reveal it is him. He reminds Cert to check his file, since there are supposed to be only 5 bodies in the mortuary. A little later, a group of EMT that is also part of Moi's team, arrives to deliver the body of a drowned woman. Cert signs off on it to confirm that the body arrived. He pushes the gurney inside the mortuary, not bothering to fix the rest, and then runs outside. A call comes in on the hospital line. It's a colonel, and since the EMTs are gone, he asks Cert to check the back of the drowned woman, to check on a tattoo. Cert walks back inside the mortuary, counts the body, and realizes there are only 5 bodies inside, when there should be 6. A call comes in again, and it's the colonel, asking if he has checked the body. He's unable to answer, which angers the colonel, since it's for an important case. He gives Cert another chance to check. The next call that comes in is from his professor, who received a call from the colonel complaining about Cert. She tells Cert that she's heard stories about him, and if they're true, then he's not qualified to be a doctor. With his future at stake, Cert determinedly goes back to the mortuary. He has a small freak out, and grabs a syringe to arm himself, as the lights start flickering. His imagination runs wild, and he sees the bodies moving. The flickering stops, and this time, the body of the drowned woman is back. Resolute, he turns her body over to check on the tattoo. Without his knowledge, Joke walks in to repeat his gurney prank. As he settles on the gurney, Cert hears him move and panics, when he finds an additional body inside. Cert grabs for the syringe to stab him. Without thinking, he pulls the sheet off and goes for Joke's eye, when the drowned woman reaches for his arm to stop him, telling him that he almost got Joke. The last story is about Moi and her roommate. This storyline happened much earlier than all the others. The roommate is flirting online with a complete stranger. Moi asks her roommate to stop flirting with strangers, but the other girl refuses, telling her there's no harm in it. The roommate decides to tell the stranger that Moi is her girlfriend. The stranger calls her a floozy, which annoys the roommate, so she replies that it's his mom, who's the real floozy. This angers the stranger, and he floods the roommate with threats of killing her. In turn, she comments that he's a psycho, while Moi reprimands her again. She turns the computer off and comforts Moi, telling her that it's just a complete stranger, who's possibly not even in Thailand. The roommate tells Moi that they should have dinner, but Moi refuses, since she's not feeling well. As the roommate is messing around with Moi's head, pretending to cure her headache, Moi has a premonition of something bad happening to her roommate. As the roommate is leaving, a neighbor of theirs opens his door. Someone's knocking on the door, which awakens Moi. She thinks it's her roommate, but when she opens the door, she realizes it's their neighbor. She tries to close the door again, but he stops her from closing it. While having dinner, the roommate is harassed by a couple of guys from another table. She pays for her dinner and leaves. They follow her to the public transport and try to convince her to go home with them. She refuses. Out of nowhere, a man in a vehicle honks at them. He steps out of the car to stop the guys from further harassing the roommate. She smiles at him. Meanwhile, back at their apartment, Moi is left alone with their weird neighbor. He tells her that he's waiting for her roommate to return. As she's staring at the guy, Moi realizes that this is actually the stranger. On their way home, the roommate interrogates her savior, who appears to be extremely nice and honorable. He insinuates that he works in internet crimes, and the roommate decides to open up about what happened earlier that evening. He asks if she knows who she was talking to, but she denies this. As they're talking, the man almost hits a bicycle rider. It's exactly the stranger. Before she can talk further, she gets a call from Moi, who warns her about the stranger. The roommate tells her savior that he's the psychopath she was talking about. Unfortunately, the two know each other. The stranger calls the roommate's savior, Kanto. This is the moment the roommate realizes she's in deep trouble. It turns out the stranger is truly a psychopath and has met Kanto through the dark web, where they made plans of killing someone together. The roommate tries to escape. The stranger catches up on her, but she eventually gains the upper hand and grabs a large stick. She starts hitting the stranger with it. However, Kanto walks up to them with a weapon. With no choice, she gives up the fight. They take her deeper into the forest, where the stranger assaults her. Kanto encourages and guides the stranger through his first crime, which they both are thoroughly enjoying. After forcing her into being intimate with him, Kanto takes out a torture belt that the stranger uses on her body. While he dismembers her, Kanto records everything. When the stranger finishes, Kanto helps him throw her body into the river. Before going home, Kanto asks the stranger who else knows, and he realizes that Moi knows of him. So the two arrive in front of Moi and her roommate's door. But before they can do anything else, they're haunted by the dead roommate, who struggles to climb up the stairs with her broken body. Moi suddenly wakes up and immediately goes for the door, thinking her roommate is back. She finds nothing but the dinner that the roommate was supposed to bring home to her that night. This was Moi's last night as an EMT, and she decides to share this story with her group. They ask her if she can see ghosts. She smiles. It's revealed that the whole night that Moi's been on the phone, she's been talking to her roommate's spirit. Her roommate has been helping her get through that evening and giving her advice on how to help the other spirits. Before the evening ends, the roommate also bids Moi farewell, since she's about to fulfill what she has set out to do. The movie ends with Kanto and the stranger picking up another victim. Without realizing it, their new victim is actually the roommate. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.